In the summer of 1807, when England's softer winds carried whispers across fields of barley, Cecilia Hartwell believed her days would continue in the steady rhythm of Ashbourne's kitchens. At 24, she possessed a quiet beauty that seemed almost accidental. Clear, thoughtful eyes, gentle composure, and a presence that soothed more than it impressed. Her world was small but ordered, shaped by the reliable glow of the hearth and the camaraderie of those who worked beside her. She expected nothing of grandeur and wanted even less, trusting that a modest life honestly lived could shelter her from the harsher tempers of the world. That expectation dissolved the moment she was summoned to the drawing room. No servant entered that chamber without trembling, for it was a realm of polished scrutiny where alliances were forged over porcelain cups and reputations ruined with a lifted brow. Flowers still dusted Cecilia's fingertips as she ascended the staircase meant for servants only in emergencies. Each step echoed with growing dread, as though her own heartbeat preceded her into the unknown. When she crossed the threshold, the room reacted like a single startled creature. Fans stilled mid-flutter, gentlemen paused with glasses suspended, and a ripple of disbelief swept through the gathering. Cecilia felt heat rise to her face as their eyes grazed her apron, her simple shoes, her unmistakable station. Near the hearth stood the Dowager Duchess of Ravenscroft, her posture rigid with authority, flanked by Parliament men whose expression suggested that matters far graver than household discipline were at hand. Before she could offer a curtsy, the chamber fell silent. Nathaniel Ravenscroft, Duke of Ashbourne, young, widower in reputation, and exceedingly distant, entered with the calm precision of a man carved from restraint. His gray eyes swept the room before settling on her, not unkindly, but with a measured stillness that revealed nothing of his thoughts. Rumor claimed he had once been warm, even hopeful, but betrayal had frozen whatever tenderness he possessed. Cecilia could not imagine why such a man would look upon her with anything but dismissal. The Dowager broke the silence with a pronouncement that felt both ceremonious and devastating. Parliament, she said, required the Duke to marry without delay. Political pressure pressed upon the estate, threatening ancient lands entangled in disputes. To preserve the Ravenscroft name, a bride of impeccable discretion and faint but traceable gentility was essential. For reasons Cecilia struggled to comprehend, she had been chosen. A distant family connection granted her the necessary veneer of legitimacy. Her quiet reputation rendered her safely uncontroversial. Shock rippled outward like a tremor, passing from lord to lady with scarcely concealed delight. Cecilia's breath caught. Marriage to a duke, forced, unequal, and unimaginably distant from the life she knew, felt like a sentence pronounced without trial. She lifted her gaze to Nathaniel, praying for contradiction, for objection, for any sign that he would refuse. Instead, he regarded her with the cool deliberation of a man evaluating an unavoidable burden. Yet for the briefest instant, something flickered in his expression, not warmth, but recognition of her fear. He stepped forward, his voice composed, but unmistakably gentle. "Miss Hartwell," he said, the words carrying with quiet authority, "it seems our futures have been arranged without our counsel." The statement was not tender, yet it was not dismissive. It acknowledged her humanity, even as it confirmed her lack of choice. Cecilia felt the weight of his acceptance settle upon her, like a mantle she could neither refuse nor comprehend. Soft murmurs filled the room, eager and merciless. Cecilia gathered her dignity and offered the most controlled curtsy she could manage, though her knees trembled beneath her. As she allowed herself to be escorted toward the corridor, she heard laughter resume, polished, brittle, triumphant. Each note stung like a spark against her pride. She descended the staircase slowly, gripping the banister as though the house itself had begun to tilt. The warm clatter of the kitchens felt impossibly distant now, separated from her not by walls, but by destiny's indifferent hand. Whatever life she had once imagined had fallen away behind that drawing-room door. And yet, As she reached the final step, Cecilia sensed that the humiliation she had endured was merely the opening chapter of a far more perilous and unpredictable story, one in which her courage might determine far more than her reputation. She felt the weight of unseen eyes even in the empty corridor, and though fear coiled within her, a small ember of resolve stirred beside it. She understood that survival in this unfamiliar world would require more than obedience. It would demand a steady heart and careful judgment. And deep within, determination whispered that she might rise to meet whatever trials waited ahead just for her. The announcement of their engagement spread through England with a swiftness Cecilia had never imagined and certainly never desired. Within a single day, her name appeared in parlors she had never entered, accompanied by astonished laughter and elegant sneers. Newspapers spoke of the match with a tone that wavered between disbelief and cruel amusement, as though her existence served merely to entertain those who believed themselves her betters. Invitations once extended to the Duke were rescinded under the guise of overcrowded guest lists. Though everyone understood the truth, society recoiled at the notion of a cook ascending to Duchess. Cecilia felt the sting of each rumor, though she bore them silently, unwilling to fuel gossip with even the smallest reaction. Nathaniel Ravenscroft, meanwhile, maintained an inscrutable composure that revealed nothing of his sentiments. Their interactions were courteous but distant, marked by a formality that felt colder than open disdain. He did not reprimand her, nor did he offer comfort. He simply behaved as a man performing a duty imposed by forces beyond his preference. Yet Cecilia sensed a restrained conflict beneath his polished exterior, as though he wrestled with obligations that clashed with something private and unspoken. As custom required, Nathaniel presented her with an engagement token, though it was unlike anything society expected from a duke. Instead of glittering jewels, he offered a modest silver locket, its surface worn but beautifully engraved. He explained only that it belonged to his late mother, a detail spoken so quietly she almost doubted she heard it correctly. The gesture should have stirred hope, yet the simplicity of the gift became another source of ridicule among the aristocracy, who interpreted it as evidence of his reluctance. Cecilia, uncertain how to read the offering, accepted it with gratitude tempered by confusion, sensing a meaning she could not entirely decipher. To escape the relentless whispers, she turned her attention to the estate's management, discovering that Ashbourne suffered from years of neglected oversight. Ledgers were inconsistent, storerooms misarranged, and staff discouraged by a cycle of disorganization. With quiet determination, she began to restore order, carefully balancing authority with humility. Her efforts surprised many, for she displayed a competence that extended far beyond culinary skill. Older stewards respected her clarity, while younger servants admired her refusal to wield her new status with arrogance. In restoring the estate, Cecilia recovered a measure of confidence, and in doing so, she attracted Nathaniel's awareness in ways neither entirely anticipated. He observed her from doorways and corridors, not intruding, but watching with a contemplative stillness. Her diligence unsettled him, though not unpleasantly. She embodied a steadiness he had not expected, and her refusal to retreat from challenges created by his own neglect stirred something faint and unfamiliar in his thoughts. Yet he remained guarded, unwilling to reveal emotion when duty still defined the boundaries of their connection. Their tentative equilibrium shattered during a garden luncheon hosted by a neighboring family, where Cecilia attended not by choice but by obligation to appear at her fiancé's side. The gathering brimmed with genteel malice concealed beneath fragrant blossoms and polished manners. Among the guests stood Lady Torrington, whose reputation for elegant cruelty was nearly a title in itself. With a smile sharpened by disdain, she approached Cecilia and remarked, loud enough for all to hear, that ambition had a curious way of lifting certain women from scullery to altar. Laughter followed, delicate yet merciless, and Cecilia felt her dignity waver beneath the weight of their amusement. Instead of retreating, she answered with a calmness that astonished the assembly. She acknowledged Lady Torrington's comment with a measured courtesy, neither apologizing for her origins nor challenging the insult. Her poise unsettled her tormentor, who expected tears rather than grace. Before the conversation could sour further, Nathaniel stepped forward, his expression carved from fury more controlled than silence. He addressed Lady Torrington with chilling precision, declaring that any disrespect shown toward his future wife reflected only the speaker's shortcomings, not Cecilia's. His defense silenced the gathering and sent a subtle tremor through the fragile hierarchy of the event. Despite the humiliation, Cecilia sensed that something in Nathaniel had shifted. His intervention, though formal, carried a resonance that hinted at genuine conviction. Yet before she could reflect on it, the estate presented her with a troubling discovery. While sorting through old correspondence in the steward's office, she uncovered a set of sealed letters referencing negotiations that threatened to divide Ravenscroft lands under the guise of parliamentary reorganization. The implications were murky, but one fact grew clear. Powerful individuals had orchestrated circumstances that coincidentally aligned with Nathaniel's forced engagement. The realization unsettled her, for the letters suggested motives far larger than social disdain. Unsure whom she could trust, she concealed the documents, intending to study them further when she possessed greater clarity. As she slipped them beneath her shawl, a faint unease settled over her, an intuition that these papers, so innocently tucked away, would alter the course of her days more significantly than any insult flung in a garden. And though she returned to her duties with practiced composure, she carried the weight of unanswered questions she dared not yet speak aloud. Night settled over Ashbourne with a gentle heaviness, as though the estate itself braced for something long delayed. Candles burned low in the corridors, their wavering light casting restless shadows along the paneling. Cecilia moved through the quiet halls with the sealed letters hidden beneath her sleeve, each step accompanied by the unsettling awareness that she held knowledge capable of altering the Duke's future. The idea of confronting Nathaniel filled her with equal measures of dread and resolve, for though she feared his cool restraint, she feared remaining silent even more. The storm outside strengthened, rattling the windows and urging her forward. She found him in the library, where firelight glowed against rows of untouched volumes and highlighted the stark line of his profile. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering briefly before politeness veiled it. She bowed her head in apology for the intrusion, yet her grip on the letters tightened as though anchoring her courage. Nathaniel closed the ledger before him and gestured for her to speak, his composure revealing nothing of his thoughts. She began hesitantly, explaining that her work in the steward's office had led to unexpected discoveries. When she placed the letters on the desk between them, his expression sharpened with immediate concern. He broke the seal of the first letter with deliberate care, though the tension in his jaw betrayed a rising unease. As he read, silence deepened around them. The correspondence described proposed divisions of Ravenscroft property, couched in legal language that barely concealed the intent to diminish his authority. The names of influential men appeared throughout, men who held seats in Parliament and who possessed the power to pressure him into marriage. Nathaniel set the final letter down slowly, as though the weight of it threatened to fracture something within him. Cecilia waited, uncertain whether he would accuse her of meddling or thank her for the warning. Instead, he exhaled a low breath and admitted that he had long suspected unseen forces at work, but lacked proof. He asked how she found the courage to bring such dangerous knowledge to him. The sincerity in his voice startled her. She explained that she could not, in good conscience, watch his estate and his name be manipulated without attempting to help. Her voice trembled, yet her conviction did not waver. Nathaniel regarded her with a depth of attention she had never before received from him, as though he finally understood she was more than the reluctant bride thrust upon him. A shift occurred then, subtle but unmistakable. He began to speak not as a duke performing a duty, but as a man unburdening himself after years of silence. He confessed that the dissolution of his former engagement had wounded him more deeply than society realized. The woman once promised to him had fled abroad with another man, leaving him to endure public humiliation while preserving her reputation with a fabricated tale of mutual separation. The scandal hardened him, teaching him that trust was a luxury he could not safely afford. He admitted that entering into another union, especially one forced, felt like reopening an old wound under the scrutiny of those who delighted in watching him falter. Cecilia listened, absorbing each confession with the care of one receiving fragile heirlooms. She realized then that his reserve was not cruelty, but armor forged for betrayal. When he finished speaking, she found herself trembling with unexpected sympathy. She confessed her own fears, admitting that she felt perpetually unworthy of the world she was entering. She feared embarrassing him, feared the scorn of society, feared losing the fragments of identity that anchored her. Nathaniel's expression softened, his eyes reflecting something warm enough to dispel a portion of her dread. "You embarrass me only when you doubt yourself," he murmured, the words quiet yet powerful. The gentle firmness of his tone sent a strange ache through her chest, not of hurt, but of something perilously close to hope. He reached for the silver locket she still wore and opened it with a tenderness she had not believed him capable of. Inside, the delicate miniature portrait of his mother gazed upward with serene dignity. Nathaniel explained that he had inherited it on the day he became duke, and he had guarded it fiercely ever since. Offering it to her, he said, had been the only way he knew to honor a bride he barely understood, though he feared she might misinterpret its modesty. Cecilia touched the locket as though it were made of breath rather than metal. The gesture felt like a wordless vow, fragile yet genuine. Their hands brushed briefly, sending a whisper of warmth through the space between them. No grand declarations passed their lips, yet the room felt altered, thick with the beginnings of trust. Nathaniel gathered the letters and said they must face these political threats together, for neither could navigate such dangers alone. The statement astonished her. He had used the word together without hesitation. As she turned to leave, her heart unsteady yet uplifted, Nathaniel spoke her name with rare softness. When she looked back, he held her gaze with a sincerity that rendered the distance between them suddenly small. "Cecilia," he said, "I find I cannot bear the thought of losing you." The quiet confession lingered in the warm lamplight, a promise yet unfulfilled, and followed her out into the shadowed corridor as though determined to stay with her until morning. Parliament convened in a chamber thick with polished formality, yet an undercurrent of unease slipped beneath its dignified surface as Nathaniel entered with Cecilia beside him. Their steps echoed in unison, though neither pretended the path ahead would be gentle. He carried the letters she had discovered, while she carried the quiet certainty that truth, once revealed, could either shatter or strengthen everything they had begun to build. The assembled men regarded them with a blend of curiosity, calculation, and restrained hostility, sensing a confrontation they had hoped to avoid. Nathaniel's posture remained impeccably composed, yet Cecilia felt the tension radiating through him like an unspoken plea for steadiness. He addressed the chamber with a clarity that silenced even his staunchest opponents, announcing that he possessed evidence of improper attempts to partition Ravenscroft lands under false pretenses. As he laid the letters before the committee, Cecilia observed the shifting expressions of several influential members whose political ambitions now hung precariously exposed. Their discomfort confirmed the validity of her discovery, and she felt a quiet surge of resolve strengthen within her. Though she could not speak formally, her presence beside Nathaniel bolstered his confidence, for the alliance they now shared extended far beyond obligation. He did not glance at her directly, yet every measured word he spoke seemed anchored by her steady nearness. When the session adjourned, murmurs erupted throughout the hall, some admiring, others resentful, yet none dismissive. In a single morning, Cecilia had witnessed the subtle reorientation of power, and she sensed that Nathaniel recognized it as well. Outside, sunlight poured across the stone steps, illuminating the tumult of emotions neither dared to voice. He offered his arm with a sincerity that needed no explanation, and she accepted, not as an accessory to his triumph, but as a partner in a struggle neither had chosen, yet both refused to relinquish. Their carriage ride home passed in thoughtful silence, yet the air brimmed with an unspoken understanding that trust, once tentative, now rooted itself with remarkable certainty. In the days that followed, society's tone toward Cecilia shifted with surprising swiftness. The same families who once dismissed her now attempted polite conversation, their smiles carefully measured and noticeably strained. Some expressed admiration for her composure during the parliamentary affair, though their compliments carried hints of envy they attempted and failed to disguise. Cecilia received their attention with the dignified restraint she had learned to cultivate, never mistaking their praise for acceptance. Nathaniel watched these interactions with subtle pride, quietly astonished by her ability to navigate a world designed to exclude her. He found himself seeking her counsel more frequently, not merely out of practicality, but because he valued the clarity she offered. One evening, at a large midsummer gathering, rumors of intrigue swirled throughout the ballroom like invisible threads tugging at every conversation. Chandeliers cast warm light across the polished floor as musicians played selections chosen to flatter noble sensibilities. Cecilia entered on Nathaniel's arm, her gown of pale blue silk chosen with understated elegance that drew admiration without ostentation. The moment she stepped into the room, the assembly's attention shifted like a tide, acknowledging a new moon. Some watched with delight, others with wary curiosity, yet none dismissed her as they once had. Nathaniel noticed their altered gazes and understood that society now tried to claim what it once scorned. Midway through the evening, during the opening measures of a waltz, Nathaniel made a choice that startled even himself. He led Cecilia to the center of the floor, but instead of beginning the dance, he addressed the guests with a calm authority that commanded silence. He spoke of loyalty, honor, and the dangers of allowing society's cruelty to dictate one's judgment. Then, with unmistakable purpose, he declared that while his first engagement had been arranged without his full consent, this union, unexpected though it was, had become something he embraced wholeheartedly. A hush settled over the room, broken only by a few gasps that failed to mask astonishment. Cecilia felt her breath catch as Nathaniel took her hand with a reverence that left no doubt regarding his sincerity. The waltz resumed, and they danced with a harmony neither had imagined possible when their engagement began. The moment seemed to realign the room, shifting their story from spectacle to something undeniably admired. In the days following the gathering, even former detractors softened their scrutiny, though Cecilia never allowed approval to sway her understanding of the world's fickleness. She had witnessed how swiftly judgment turned, and she anchored herself instead to the quiet strength she and Nathaniel were learning to cultivate together. Their wedding took place beneath late summer sunlight that filtered through Ashbourne's chapel windows, casting warm patterns across polished pews. Cecilia walked the aisle with deliberate grace, not as a woman elevated beyond her station, but as one who had risen through steadfast character. Nathaniel waited with an expression gentler than any he had allowed himself in years, recognizing the depth of the transformation they had undergone together. When he lifted her hand to his lips, his whisper carried the weight of truth rather than duty. The vows they exchanged bound more than their futures. They affirmed the courage with which they had faced a world determined to separate them. Outside the chapel, the gardens shimmered with the muted brilliance of late summer bloom. Cecilia and Nathaniel walked side by side, no longer defined by circumstance, but strengthened by the trials they had endured. Their steps moved in unspoken synchrony, their hands entwined as though they had always belonged together, guided not by arrangement, but by devotion quietly forged in the crucible of adversity.